a welcome back to the things we know. And I love our title for things like this because this is
Yeah.
this is what we've learned and what we know and what we think. um, and I think we're pretty good and transparent about that. And if we're not, we'd love to hear.
Get your own podcast.
Right. We also love feedback and corrections.
We do.
So today we're talking about how easy it is, really timely. It always is lately. How easy it has become to dehumanize each other in a world that's really polarized with a lot of closed and tailored media.
Yeah. And, when we live in these echo chambers, it's very easy for all of us to lose sight of really just the most basic truth, which is every single human being is born wanting love, safety, belonging, health. And yet, the louder the rhetoric gets, the more willing people on both sides are are ready to deny other humans those things.
Right. Because they're willing to believe disinformation that helps them feel better about denying it. It's so, yeah, we'll get into that. Ugh. Okay. I
Breathe.
want to I just to get into some examples in case you're like, what are you talking about? We could really, I mean, this is on a micro and macro level in everyone's life if you really look at it. But think about how often entire groups of people are reduced to labels. And it happens on both sides. And we want to be really transparent about that. Democrats get called radicals, communists, terrorists as of lately. Republicans get called Nazis or fascists, Hitler, like all those things. Police are portrayed either as saints or monsters. None of that is real when you're talking about individuals.
Right.
But it makes it easy to stop seeing people as human beings. Now, I mean, the one thing I will say, technically, historically, there was a group that called themselves the Nazis proudly. So I just think labeling certain behavior as Nazis or certain things or words as like that person's a Nazi, it gets into that dangerous territory. Yeah.
Absolutely. And some people are actively owning that title again, Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
it is what
Yes.
it is, but in the where we're coming from is, as you just said, that is dangerous when we can convince ourselves that a human is their label. Then it becomes easier to vote against their rights, to justify cruelty, to dismiss what they're thinking or feeling. Um, Ultimately, it just doesn't serve.
Yeah. And a pretty well-known researcher, sociologist, Brene Brown, an author. She talks a lot about this. If you've ever like dabbled in any of her early work or even more recent work, she always talks about, she reminds us that dehumanization always starts with words and images. And if you look at, what happened in Nazi Germany, and you remember, oh my God, what's the book that I loved so much? Oh, it's about that girl in books. Why am I totally blanking? It's like a really, really well popular book. It'll come to me. But it talks about how it starts with words, right? So she
Mm,
reminds us that it always starts with words and images. So when we engage, her quote is, when we engage in dehumanizing rhetoric or promote dehumanizing images, we diminish our own humanity in the process. That over
mm,
time, like as we draw these circles and those, circles start to exclude people, it becomes
yeah.
really easy to not see people on your level and see them as less than. It makes it easier to be okay with what's happening to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question. And again, so that's why the landscape, the media landscape, the political landscape that we are in right now, where again, media politicians are calling other humans animals. They're treating immigrants as a flood or an infestation when they're flooding our country. Um, Again, this history shows time and time again, not just Nazi Germany, but as we talked about in Cast, Jim Crow, all of the bullshit from back in America's early days, it just shows us that this kind of framing paves the way for violence, which we're seeing, and inhumane policies.
Which we're seeing.
Yes. Yeah. And so again, we're not just talking about name calling, right? There are actual pastors and political leaders saying horrifying things. Let me say that again. Pastors saying horrifying things. In Colorado, a state party email referred to LGBTQ plus people as godless groomers and encouraged burning pride flags,
Mm.
which, okay, right? Supposedly that's free speech, although I'm pretty sure we were just told we can't burn flags anymore from this regime.
Right. And remember, we're talking about rainbow flags in schools to make children who
Yeah.
don't feel like they fit in feel like safe and like they belong. So
Yep.
okay. And also, like, I don't know, a lot of people have seen and heard, it's been in different documentaries. And I want to say, as long ago as 8 years ago, we started seeing there's this one particular pastor named Steven Anderson in Arizona. I'll say his name because he proudly posted this himself and
Mm.
felt really good about it, saying LGBTQ stands for let God burn them quickly.
Oh my
He's
fucking God.
Yeah, he's the pastor of a place called, or he was, I don't know if that still exists, Faithful Word Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. And he's known for hate speech, and he's banned actually, because it's been so horrifying. But he also, and because we live in a time where, internet and social media create these niche, gatherings for people to come together. He's emboldened right now,
Yeah.
especially in this new era that we're in, where it's like okay to say the R word again, and it's
Mm.
like, which is a totally dehumanizing word as a mom of someone with an intellectual disability, and it drives me nuts that I like. There's a lot of comedians, Mark Maron in particular, who will say, and we'll get to this. We'll get to what liberals have also done wrong in dehumanizing. Like they've
Yep.
annoyed people into fascism, and that like some people are just happy to get to say the R word again. Like really? Anyway, it's so important that we fight for facts and not sensationalism, which is why I looked this up about this guy to like be sure that I'm sharing this with you, okay? Because lies become the dehumanizing force that is used to strip groups of their rights. When you talk about a group that like you should burn, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel human, that
Right.
it's real people. And so I'm not saying because this pastor did this, all pastors are homophobic, but it is worth noting that a disturbing number of pastors and youth pastors who have loudly accused LGBTQ people of grooming children have themselves been arrested for child pornography or attempting to lure minors just this year. Just this year alone, there was like a number of cases. I want to say there were 34 in the month of July. But at first I was like, if
Jesus.
I were to try to follow this, it's a little horrifying just
Mm.
from, this year alone, the amount of like very evidential proof of pictures on phones and texts with some political leaders and pastors with minors is astounding. Like the sexual crimes, that's all I'm looking at. So like example, a North Carolina pastor charged with multiple counts of sexual exploitation, a Virginia youth pastor accused of luring teens online, a Texas church volunteer caught with hundreds of explicit images. I grew up Catholic. I'm very well aware of the Catholic Church and
Oh, you and me both.
it's scandals. And I know amazing priests, and I know a ton of wonderful people in Christian leadership who are like, this is not them. But my version of what they're doing would be to say they're all pedophiles, and they're not.
Right. Right.
So, please be careful, because that would be really easy for me to do. And I wanted to be sure I wasn't guilty of it, generalizing a whole group. So I checked. And what you find when you look at this stuff is alarming statistics. But as is the case in all groups, if somebody
Right.
commits a horrible crime, they should pay for it. But everybody who has the same stats as them, whether it's the same color skin or the same sexual orientation, or they live in the same place or they're from the same place, they aren't all guilty of that.
Right. Right.
Um,
And it's interesting because I think, if we're so there's the pastor version, right? And then of course there's the political version of while Hillary Clinton was running for office, the pedophile pizza parlor basement that didn't exist. And yet, here we sit. Huh. And the Epstein files still haven't been released. So
yeah, this whole thing
fascinating.
about pedophiles, I know,
So
so
curious.
interesting.
And to your point, like if 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 gosh, hopefully those files come out, if there are Democrats on that
And there are.
list, a million, a bazillion percent
And they
there is,
should all pay for it.
then they
I mean,
should all pay the price, right? But again, it goes beyond projection, right? Because one could, I mean, you look at these stats, or you look at the brouhaha around the pizza parlor in 2016 or whatever year that was, um, and you just knew it was projection. You just knew, you know,
well, that, yeah. And
and still,
what I was going to say, I heard something really funny yesterday. I'm trying to remember what podcast I was listening to. It was so funny. Maybe it was like the Daily Show or something, but that this new conspiracy that happened around the election a year or two ago, that JFK Jr. was still alive. What a horrible thing to do. Like, these people have actual family. That
although
the QAnon people were embarrassed by that. They were embarrassed by that.
it's
They're
bad
like,
when.
they're delegitimizing us with this bullshit. Like, let's get back to this whole pizza crap that we have no proof of. I thought that was pretty funny. But what I was going to say was, this isn't my aha, but it's, something I was reading in, one of the many things I've been reading recently, which was, and I identify with it. I didn't grow up evangelical or Pentecostal. I saw that as pretty extreme, but I grew up, Catholic and
Yeah.
and in a conservative area. So, like, growing up being taught the godly men, who, had a coat and tie. It wasn't necessarily ever implied to me that white was it, but I'm sure that was just implicit. But, like, that the godly men went to church and they were clean cut, right? And these long haired tattooed rock singers were like devil worshippers. And that invocation of demon that happens so much in so many of these cases, including like LGBTQ people, that's like the devil, and let God burn them or whatever. That's a horrific thing. The invocation of demon is like a very fast track to dehumanizing, because nobody wants anything to do with that. Without even thinking about it, if someone says demon, they're like, yeah, I'm not gonna bother. I'm not gonna watch that. I'm not gonna do that, because, like, I don't want to fuck with that.
Totally. Well, and being Gen X, we really grew up with it. I mean, this is kind of what prompted us to think about this topic, was watching after Ozzy Osbourne passed, and his funeral, and just everything he did outside of biting the head off a bat. Big fucking deal. You know what I mean? Like, there's just, he was so him. Judas Priest, heavy metal in general in the 80s, Tipper Gore leading that,
Alice Cooper,
Alice Cooper, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of something Darren always says, going to, because, as I've said before, Darren writes horror.
Oh, yes.
I need to be very clear about what he writes. Enunciate. But whenever we are doing something where we are with people in the horror community, they are the nicest, sweetest, gentlest people. And I suspect that same thing is true for any heavy metal artist, right? And yet, so we were so taught that backward masking and all the la la la, and it's just, and so you're right. We stayed away from it, and we went to church and prayed and took communion and did confession and all those things. I mean, I think you grew up more Catholic than I did, but
I for sure did. For sure did. I
did it for 12 grades.
I had grandparents and my dad who went every day to mass too.
I had a family like that.
I will say this, and we're probably going to get to this in our notes, but I will say this, like, you saying that reminds me of so many wonderful experiments we've seen out there, where you take, some biker dude and some church lady, or you take, some trans person and some corporate guy, whatever. You put two people together, they will find something in common. They will have, a beer helps, but like, what it's reminding me of, though, when you say that is, and more I hear this, because I think, like, I am so fascinated by everything about deconstruction out there, from evangelical, like, extreme, watching Shiny Happy People and listening and reading some of those books, right? And these people haven't left Jesus at all. They've just been able to take out, like, all the abuse and all the gaslighting, and, like, separate themselves from that and really see the difference. And what I am noticing, especially where we're seeing all these cases of people who are demonizing drag queens for doing the very thing that they're getting caught for, by police for doing, right? Grooming children, is, I think, first of all, people protest too much. They project. People are like, it's more and more true every day that I live right now that what you accuse is what you're guilty of, right? Every accusation is a confession. That's often true. That is often true. It's more often true than I realized. But also, like, the more you demonize behavior or make things so strict, or, that Anne Frank is getting banned, the more you make everything taboo, the more likely you're going to cause some really unhealthy fetish or behavior to come out, because you're suppressing normal human curiosity. So for like, one of the reasons I guess Anne Frank gets banned is because she's having normal teenage like sexual curiosities about how her body's changing, and about like she's trapped with this one kid, like really, really ridiculous that people are trying to keep people from thinking that that's okay. When you make sex so taboo, and then you think on the wedding night that they've saved their husband for, they're going to suddenly, be great at it and have this like fun time with it, when there's all this shame that came with it. No wonder we end up with abuse and marital rape and all this stuff. So not to go too far in that direction, but like this really does still speak to dehumanizing, because the more you like classify and make things so wrong and polarize us, the worse it gets. The worse it gets. And we have no chance of like seeing humanity in each other and ourselves.
I know what you're saying about, put two archetypes, different archetypes together and they'll find something in common. But I actually want to argue that point a little bit, in that because of what has happened and because of the dehumanization and the labels, over the summer, I don't know if you've watched this because we have not talked about this, but there was the very famous, well, it's become infamous now, interview on Jubilee with Mehdi Hassan and 20 far-right conservatives. Did you watch that?
I didn't watch that one. I watched the one with Sam Cedar.
The one with Mehdi
Similar.
is
I've seen
fascinating.
like little bits of it, and it is fascinating and
It
scary
is,
and
and
so
it is,
sad.
and it is scary. And so, Mehdi is a journalist, used to be on MSNBC, has his own, I think, show now on YouTube, maybe. Amazing, super smart, just brilliant. And he gets in a room with these 20 very far right.
And they're really
So
young, right?
they're young, yep.
Mhm.
Um, and they there is no common ground. There is no
Yeah.
common ground. And the far right people are standing their ground and literally walking out thinking they've won against what Mehdi's facts, really, and his constitutional knowledge. And quite frankly, several times throughout the interview, Mehdi actively says, okay, so you literally want me out of this country, because he is
Mhm.
British, Indian by descent, I believe.
Mhm.
And but he lives here. He's documented. He's an American citizen now.
Mhm.
And there are several, and the young men, mostly men, there's some women, are like, yep, you don't belong here. Even
Mhm.
an Iranian man who, again, is an American citizen, but believes, because,
Yeah,
that's
that's the part I saw, which was like,
mind
yeah.
blowing. But
No, you're
that's,
you're you're right. I still think if they sat long enough, they would have to agree that there's like food they don't like, or think that kids that they love, right? Like they both have kids that they love, or something like that. At a certain point, I don't think it would solve anything. I'm just saying, at a certain point, human beings have to admit, like, we put our pants on one leg at a time. We worry about like our children, and
yes,
someone might not agree that like someone's children mean as much as theirs. That's where we have
right,
this problem.
exactly.
But like,
Yeah.
there is a lot less dehumanizing that happens when someone's looking into someone's eyes, I think, is really what I think. But I do think like it's going to take so much more than that to actually get them to want to live side by side.
Yeah, I would say 80-20 rule, right? Like
Right.
80% of the time, you're exactly right. That get to, I mean, I know, without knowing exactly, that I have friends who have voted a way I would not approve of.
Well,
And we have chosen not to discuss it. You know,
same with me. I'm related to many
a
and I
million,
love them.
absolutely, absolutely. So yes, can I sit in a room with them and have a beer? Absolutely. But there's 20% like those people on
Yeah.
interviewing with Medi who absolutely, I don't think would ever come to that understanding.
No,
I
that's
truly believe that. And
I
it's
totally
because
agree
of
with
this
you.
dehumanization. And
Well, that's
especially,
what's so hard. Like I've heard a Senator Chris Murphy and people like probably even saying his name. If anyone that like far right is listening, they'd be like, wow, at his name, I'm sure. But
Chris Murphy, yeah.
yeah. But he said, honestly, I have colleagues in the Senate
Hmm.
that truly believe that we are evil and they
Yeah,
are like it is really hard to argue with that when they're so rooted that what they're doing is right. Like there are some people who it's a grift and they know it and
right.
they are using language to manipulate and win and make money. And they are, whether it's for the prison systems or whatever, there's a lot of grifters here, but there are truly leaders
Hmm.
and voters who believe in their heart that like empathy is a sin and that like they're rooting out evil. And how do you argue with that? How do you cross that divide?
Yeah,
But it is dehumanizing. So yeah,
right,
let's talk about
right.
like what's really happening.
Yeah, and I mean, being here in LA in the beginning of the summer, Jesus God, living through that. I almost marvel every single day at what 2025 has borne for this poor city between the fires at the beginning of the year and then 6 months later, we're dealing with ICE coming in and just absolutely, taking immigrants and migrants and treating them as political pawns, stripping them of their decency and their agency. It sort of starts out here, but then we end up with, and thank God it's going away, but alligator Alcatraz down in Florida, and then what, Cornhusker Clink in Nebraska. Like, oh my God,
Yeah, there's a
using
bunch actually.
oh
There's
oh
one in
yeah,
Indiana.
there's one in Indiana. Yeah. And they have
Oh,
these cutesy little names. And it's just,
disgusting.
it's absolutely, absolutely disgusting. Using our taxpayer money to kidnap people off the street and being pushed, you know, to the general public who doesn't do a deep dive to the way we're doing here to really understand the truth of the matter. They're selling fear. They are normalizing brutality, and then they're trying to recruit people with slogans. I mean,
Oh
although
yeah.
I will say the funniest thing is if you're getting so low that you have to get Dean Cain to join ICE. But
That's
again,
so
these
funny.
are just human beings who have
Yeah.
come to America to build a better life. Many of them are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing as law here as a path to citizenship and getting kidnapped in that process. You know, it's they're just like all of us. We're
and
just
being
trying
and
to
being
survive.
treated even if they aren't doing the right things. I mean, so many people are showing up and following. It's just easier and lazier to get them at appointments where they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do at the
Exactly.
court.
Yeah.
But even if they're not, even if they are not here legally, it's actually not a criminal offense. It's a civil
Right.
offense. And being treated like violent criminals, being ripped from the cars, having their cars damaged, being, kidnapped in front of their children, and then having people
Mm.
like that, like that's what they wanted, that's what they voted for. How did you get there? How did you get there to think that these human beings who actually deserve due process, even if they're not here, in the proper channels, how did you get there where you think that they deserve that? And like I obviously could get upset enough to say what I think the people doing that to them deserve, but they're actually human beings who deserve due process also. So like I'm really trying to be careful here to not be like, I'm right, you're wrong. But in this case, I just think like these are all humans. And if if you're doing it, especially those of you voting this way or thinking this is okay because you feel like it's divinely, blessed by your religion, how like how is that in line with anything that sounds like charitable or kind or loving or
Love thy
forgiving?
neighbor.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm sounding soapboxy. I guess to me, I like this example. I hate it. I hate that this is happening. I like this example as one of the most painful realities of dehumanization. Like, what had to happen for people to not just believe this is okay, but to want to take their picture in front of these fucking signs
I
and
know.
buy a T-shirt, So
Yeah.
like, it's the worst. People aren't just framed; they're like branded and harmed. They're
Yeah.
harmed because of it.
Yeah, and I think there's something you said earlier about they voted for this. I mean, I think there's a fair amount of people who voted for Trump who would say, I didn't vote for this. I voted for lower groceries and more, blah, blah, blah. And but somewhere in the rhetoric, whether they were conscious of it or not, this man told us exactly what he was going to do.
It's
Project
true.
2025 told us
It's true.
exactly what he was going to do.
So you did vote for it. You just didn't pay attention. But
Correct.
people did want reduction in crime. They wanted the borders to
Sure,
be
so
like,
do I.
they wanted the borders to be a little, better at like
Mm-hmm.
doing the right job. So did we all. I
Yep.
think anybody, whether they're undocumented or not, who commits a violent crime deserves to be not here and in prison, right?
Yep.
But to have like I can think of two very prominent cases. They're horrific. They're horrible. I feel for their families, where the worst kinds of crimes were committed against their child, and because they happen to be undocumented, all undocumented people are here to rape your child and here to do these
Right.
horrible things. And we had actual stats that prove that the majority of violent crimes were not committed by immigrants or undocumented immigrants, but the story became that. So
Right.
the story within some closed media environments that fit that narrative have people believing it, so that what they're seeing, where people are getting grabbed out of their cars, fits that, and they feel like they did vote for that. They voted for all these. They're not paying attention to the fact that more than half these people that got disappeared and sent off to gulags had no criminal history, or like
Right.
this mom 18 years ago had a minor weed offense, like weed possession offense, and now she's like in some other country and her kids will never see her again. These are things I really think most rational humans wouldn't wish on anyone and wouldn't say they're voted for, but they did by not paying attention and by
Correct.
believing. And in some cases, I have to say, in some cases, it is like where you're hearing things and what you're believing that's feeding it. So it's like, how do we? It's not like people are getting both stories and just believing one. In some cases, they are not hearing the truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I could go down a whole nother path around that. But
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. You're right. They're choosing a particular line of news gathering, and they will never hear the truth. No one who was watching Fox News understood that it wasn't all of LA, that it was like 4 square blocks that was happening at the beginning of the summer. It was LA's burning. LA is vast. It was 4 square blocks, nowhere near hardly anybody even living, but
Right. Yeah.
whatever. And so there we go. Let's go to cities, right? It's not just migrants, it's cities that we both live in, love,
Mhm.
have lived in, that are vibrant with music and fun and families and cooperation and creativity and community. And yet, they're all burning down. They're all on fire. They're all riddled with crime. I mean, literally, LA,
It's just ash here in
Chicago,
Portland. We just walk around
Portland,
ash.
DC, though. I mean, that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
but all these cities that are being demonized, you and I have lived in every single one of them.
I've lived in DC.
Yeah.
I'm talking to friends there, and they're like, yeah, there is a lot of people. They are in really affluent areas where they're getting a lot of news, and they're trying to piss off, liberal protesters who are pretty affluent people. They're not in the areas where they have seen, high crime in the past. They're just not there. So it's interesting to wonder what the real game is here, which we know. Portland, I in 2020, I was constantly like when I would travel and people would be like, "Ooh, you okay? You guys okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yep.
One of my flower baskets burned in the sun, but no, we're not burning down our city. And yes, at any given time that things are happening in the world, it is a very, very like, news attentive place. And so, yeah, right now outside ICE facilities, there's a lot of demonstrations. There's like a music festival going there on there. And there was some pretty heated, protests in 2020. And what it does is it doesn't attract Antifa and Proud Boys alike
Right.
because we're a purple state. So that made it in the news. But what gets on the news at the time with that administration and Bill Barr was saying we were, what was it? We were a Antarctic state. We were declared an
Nice.
Antarctic state, which was like, cool, great.
I know. Sweet. Cool, cool, cool.
Let's get a tattoo. But no, it was never ever. In fact, I wrote to my friend in DC to say, I know as a person who lives in Portland, just like I said to you, when everyone was saying LA was just unlivable months ago.
Yep.
I said, I live in Portland, so I know it. Like, I'm checking with you first. And she said, it's complete farce.
Yep. Yep.
So same
No,
with you.
I mean,
You were looking down at the street where
I was
supposedly it
literally,
was all happening.
where's everything? What's burning? Like, I saw fires at the beginning of the year where we got no National Guard and help from the administration, but I see nothing now. And then, of course, 20 years in Chicago, same thing. Like, I'd tell people back in the Midwest, I lived in Chicago, and they'd be like, oh, really? There's murders there all the time. And again, here he is trying to bring in, and this, by God willing, by the time this drops, he'll stop. But he's threatening to bring in the National Guard to Chicago because it's just a hellhole. And I mean, the amount of posts showing how horrible it is to live in Chicago with festivals and community gardens and this of course is the most beautiful time to be in Chicago. It's so gorgeous there in the fall. And like DC, their crime is down. Their crime
I
is
know.
down. There is zippo reason to send National Guard into any town currently, any big city, because pretty much across the board, crime is down. Where crime is up is in the red states. But I guarantee you, no National Guard will end up there.
I just was listening yesterday to, I haven't fact checked this, but that CDC has removed all the crime statistics from their site. So people can't fact check that. But, it got fact checked before they had removed it.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. Same thing happened with, crime rates of immigrants. Gone. So the thing about this portrayal, obviously, and I've said this so many times because I lived in New Orleans for a long time after I lived in DC, which, I worked in the Desire Housing Project, famously rough, not unlike some of the housing areas of Southside Chicago, right? Like I remember reading books about that. There are mothers there more than anything else. I've always said, this narrative that people bought and like media, also added to, because the same things happened with misogyny, right? But this idea that like there's these bad neighborhoods, you're not safe there, is so ridiculous. You're not going to get off a freeway and have everyone pointing a gun at you. In impoverished areas, yes, crime can happen, and over time that has been a symptom for sure. But in general, that this portrayal is erasing that there are parents with dreams for their kids who want to keep their kids safe. There's grandparents, there's children, there's whole communities, there's teachers who make nothing to make sure these kids show up every day. So it like removes the soul from real lives. And it also just neglects the fact that there's like a lot of culture and a lot of happy stuff happening, coming together, where I was just in Boston right after I took my son to college, and everywhere I went, people of all different, I know these cities have their racial tensions, and I know all this stuff, but everywhere you went, I could see people cooperating because they have to. They're taking public transportation together. They're moving around in the streets and going to work every day. And it is not perfect, but there are people who choose to live there who are part of it. There is this Victory Gardens. I don't know if you know this about Boston. I learned this just while I was there because I was out on a walk. Griffin was having seizures, so we were taking turns giving ourselves like times to get out. And I went on this huge walk in the part of, near Fenway. Victory Gardens there's 500 different, somewhere in the 500s, different plots, okay, of gardens, and people have been managing them since the 30s.
Oh, wow.
In the 40s, during and just after the war, the Victory Gardens were supplying 40% of the nation's produce. And these were citizens who came together to grow different things to like sell at cost to just make sure people were fed. A lot of it was women and migrants and like retired people. And walking through there was like people playing music. Some people created like a sitting and reading garden. Some people are tending to vegetables. Some people have roses in there. It is the most fantastic thing. And I saw every kind of person in there, like every ethnicity and age and gender. And it was fabulous. And I thought, like, this is an imperfect city. We all know that, but how cool. And that mayor, man, she's so cool that I'm totally forgetting her name. She's an Asian, kind of younger woman.
Oh,
she's
yes.
a young kid.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love how she's just calling that out, saying we are safe. We do take care of each other. We are not perfect, but like stop believing. I've heard from so many people in my family who don't live in cities, how awful cities are. And I'm like, that's funny. You don't live in one.
Right.
I mean, I hear from I have friends who live right outside of Portland who say Portland's a shithole. And I'm like, it is not in its best years, but you don't live here, like, and you're not paying these crazy taxes. So let the people who do, work hard at getting it to be someplace you want to go to dinner, I guess. But just like, there's a lot of work to be done and people choose it.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's just branding.
Calling it just a bunch of criminals, a bunch of murderers, like that is so dehumanizing.
Yep. If it bleeds, it leads. It's a pure branding situation.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So this is one of the conversations we had about this topic. Is what's so funny is this week, Stephen Miller, earlier, I think last week, was yelling about white hippies, which cracks me up. These white hippies who don't even live here, and they don't like.
He just can't grow hair, so he's jealous.
There's a lot of white hippies. That's true. Who actually live in DC because unfortunately it's a very expensive place to live. So there's a lot of older people. But anyway, then this week he said, these protesters are terrorists, which is fascinating. But I have a whole lot to say about that. But take us.
Yeah.
When people are talking about these radical lunatics, is that us? Because last I checked, we're both white, we're heterosexual, we've been married for 30 years, we're raising white kids. I grew up really Catholic. We have relatives, we have relatives like who are in all walks of life, like, but we all like came from the same basic mold. So like, what do you think we look like? Or do we all have shaved heads and like, nipple piercings, or like, what do you think we look like?
I appreciate that you haven't said tattoos.
Well, I love that. People on both sides have tattoos. That's pretty clear.
I know.
Some are scarier than others and some are hilarious. But, like I think about this woman who is challenging Lindsey Graham, and I'm super impressed by her. Lindsey Graham, who's obviously a longtime senator in South Carolina, she's going to run against him. And she's like, he'll paint me as a radical. She's a mom. She's a pediatrician. She's probably arguably more in touch with working families. But we will just get grouped as radical left lunatics, demons, so that nobody really wants to learn or hear from us. And that's frustrating because I feel like I have more in common with them than they realize. I have same desires, dreams, fears, priorities as any parent or woman or citizen. And I hate being reduced to that. And I try really, really hard not to do the same in reverse.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind being called a radical. I mean, because if I am the opposite of radical, which is them, then okay, I own that. I'll take that moniker. But I think what's interesting is the idea that is the lies behind the radical, right? Like, again, I want so badly to pull out my Southern accent and be like, bless his heart, but I bless none of Stephen Miller's heart. He is literally the architect of everything dehumanizing going on right now, right? So yeah, there's the old white hippies, there's the radical teachers, public school teachers, along with everything else they have to deal with. They're
Shootings and everything, they have to
Yeah,
be called
and they're being smeared saying
propagandists.
teaching children to hate themselves. None of this is true, but it echoes worldwide. And you made some comment when we were talking about that pastor earlier, and you said he's banned from countries and he doesn't really speak. We can't hear him, but that's the problem with social media and YouTube. Like, the stuff never disappears. So
Right.
if you want to go find a way to back up your bias, it's
Right. Go
very,
find it.
very easy to do, right? And so, again, we're radical leftists and terrorists and enemies of the state because we disagree with Trump. I mean, what is more American than our right to disagree with our president? I
I
also
remember them
disagree
disagreeing
with
quite a
Biden.
bit.
I disagree with Biden. I disagree. There's lots of things I disagree with on both sides.
I
But,
know.
again, they've gotten rid of all the stats and the experts that you could do the deep dive. If you haven't already, it'd be really, really hard now, as you just said, to find the facts beyond this. Like, again, we did What Are Facts at the beginning of this season. Those
Yeah.
facts have disappeared off the internet. You can't even find them anymore.
Yeah.
It's
So much easier to paint a picture of
yeah,
lunatics who are demons when you don't have any proof that they're human.
absolutely.
I keep, oh, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
I was just laughing. I sent this to you before we started, and I remember now. I am not sure this is entirely true, but a year ago I had posted this on my Facebook page. I had seen this somewhere, and again, I think it was debunked as not actually having happened, but the sentiment is still there, which says that Fox News had put up Tim Walz's communist agenda, and it was things like unsupervised female health decisions, rampant LGBTQIA plus rights, school lunches for unemployed minors. See, I think that's why I think it's fake, because I'm sure they didn't put unemployed minors.
Unemployed.
But remember, the guy was like, if they can't afford it, they should go to work. Medical care for elderly, sick, or injured, taxes on corporate profits, free non-Christian college, believes in climate change hoax. Now, again, I think this is a joke, but the reality of it is that is actually what they think they think we are ruining America by wanting these basic human rights.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And I think about like that old white hippies being so dangerous. It's so
Are we
funny to
old white
me.
hippies, or is it older than us? Is it
Well, I
like
was thinking
boomers?
about like my sweet aunt and uncle in
Yeah,
Santa Fe. They're Buddhists and
I know.
white
I
haired in
love
their
them.
80s, and they keep making this big sign that in this beautiful script that says "Make America Gracious Again," and they just go and they silently hold that up. They're Buddhist. He's a retired attorney who's worked on behalf of the deaf community and generations of Native Americans who've been so displaced and
Yeah.
dehumanized, right? And
Mm.
they're super compassionate. They're not radicals, and like whatever that means, or are they radically compassionate? I think, it's just,
Yeah.
but now like this administration would label them terrorists and for like showing up and disagreeing. So they're not burning flags. And even that is protected under the First Amendment, but that's
For
a whole
now.
thing. Um, anyway, it's right. Obviously we are on one side of this and we can see as best as we can from metacognition, like where everyone's getting their news will never ever get them to see the other side as human. We're trying. We're trying here because we're never going to get to the other side of this until people don't see that it's not left and right. It is like the powerful and the not powerful, and you thinking it's left versus right are getting used
Yeah.
and you're getting lied to. And it is so much more beyond that now. Right now it's between dictatorship and democracy.
Yep.
And maybe democracy is a word people don't care about. I don't know. I just,
Well, even
what's
that
so
has
weird is
been,
I was raised by conservative people who would never want military going into any city. They would never want the overreach that's happening here.
but
And
that's the thing.
I'm
Democracy has been made a bad word.
floored. I've been floored
Yeah.
by all the overreach that's happening that they're actually supporting. It's shocking.
Yeah. I mean, people who did actually terrorize the Capitol on January
Mm.
6th of 2017, they're being pardoned awarded, put into the cabinet. Again, this idea of what next year is 250 years that America
Mm.
has been around. That is, we're maybe a toddler in the history of the world, and so this, when if you think that this is solid, I would invite you to do a little bit more research. This We are in a very, with all this dehumanizing, um, of women, of people of color, of LGBTQ, of immigrants, legally here, not legally here yet,
Disabled, elderly.
disabled,
Yeah.
elderly, anybody that is not a billionaire white man, uh, typically cisgendered, uh, as being dehumanized, and it is a slippery slope towards a police state.
Yeah. Yeah. Making any group less human is
Yep.
the tool, and it's what's so sad is it's not even clever or new. It's just,
It's
if
not.
you look at anything from history, the people who ended up being on the right side of history never violated human rights,
Right.
and vice versa, where human rights get trampled, where groups get dehumanized, that leads to the worst things, leads to some of the worst moments of history, the darkest times. And so it's not hyperbole, and it's not, it's not overreaction. It's like, we're here and we're calmly saying, like, until we can stop playing into this like social media polarization that has us just really not seeing each other as human, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, and so let's speak to, when we were discussing this yesterday, we also wanted, as we said at the beginning of this, we want to talk about um I don't know if I'm going to call it dehumanization, but certainly the name calling and the labeling of people who are vote MAGA aligned, white Americans in particular,
Right.
right? How did they come to feel dehumanized themselves?
Well, and this is where, I feel like the Democratic Party has been so messed up for so long, and
Yes,
that's really come
no
to,
question.
so long. It was, they lost the election as much as the other side won, and
Mm,
I think it happened years ago. I think Democrat. I heard this recently, and I will repeat it, and I felt it in my bones then. Dem- as much as desperately as I wanted a woman, and
mm,
voted for her, Democrats really underestimated the hate for Hillary that was out there. Like, they
mm.
were not totally on board with him, but their hate for Hillary, which can go into all the dehumanization things that like were happening, that got put on her as well. So like, it started with that, but like for years and years, a group of like less educated, poor people, often white, but not only, like
Yeah.
just like less educated, less resourced people were ignored by the Democratic Party. They were talked about. They were sort of, like, paraded out, and like told little talking points too, but no one really was talking to them and listening to them. And at the same time, the rise of, this, Christian nationalism, and the proliferation of churches, and all these babies being born, and all this like procreation in those groups, like when that's growing and the Democrats are doing nothing really of substance to notice that and address it. And this is a very pedestrian way of looking at it, and I'm sure you can come at me with all kinds of facts, but in general, I think like there's an argument to be made that like they felt invisible, maligned, criticized, belittled. I do not agree for a second at all that Christians are being persecuted because they still have the national holidays, they still have tax exemption,
There's
they
no
have
war on
entire schools,
Christmas.
right? So I know that you're being told by your leaders that that's the case, and that riles you up, but
Right.
I don't think that there's any proof of that. However, when you believe that, and your needs and your things that are important to you aren't being really like addressed, then I get it. Like, it
Hmm.
just like it fills the vacuum, right?
Yep.
So like there's so much to learn on all sides of this about how we treat and talk to and annoy each other at the very least, and like hurt each other at the worst. And I'm trying so hard to learn that, to see beyond what is right now going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that if you are having a hard time making ends meet and you're being told that it's immigrants taking your jobs, um, and you only feel listened to by the MAGA side of politics, um, that I mean, I guess that makes sense. I like you. I also don't think men are being persecuted either, Christians or men. But I understand that the Democrats absolutely, positively have not spoke to the needs of the working class, the blue collar, for decades, which
Yeah.
is why we are where we are. I mean, probably since Bill
Mhm.
Clinton, quite frankly, you know, and I have a lot of beef with, with Bill Clinton. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. I do not put him on a pedestal, but he was able to speak to that back then
Mhm.
in a way that I don't think anybody ever could. And
Yeah.
anybody else has been able to, Hillary included,
And
you know,
unfortunately, he also contributed he gained a lot of votes in his tough on crime and contributed to the
correct.
dehumanization of the Black community
Absolutely.
when it came to drugs and imprisonment and all that stuff. So, yes, we have a lot of beef.
Yes.
And so, for all the good, he did a lot of bad too. But
Yeah.
we are where we are in this weird place where it's hard to ignore the dehumanization happening with Christian nationalists. I'm not saying
Yeah.
Christians, I'm saying Christian nationalists, because when you believe your administration is like blessed by your creator and that all of this is happening for the good of I don't know what, but you're not going to see what I see, and this is going to sound dehumanizing, and I'm going to own that. Cult behavior excuses the behavior of their leader and makes
Yes.
excuses for it and rationalizes it to no end. And so this very non-Christian facts about these leaders, in terms of their own 10 commandments,
Right.
um, their own, the 10 commandments is interesting. So like, I think about there's this woman I follow. I love how she calls herself a gutter Catholic. She's like, there's like the extreme Opus Dei, extreme right Christians who Catholics who believe that they want a theocracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the ones who stand for the least of these. And I think, what if Christians would choose to believe what they're ostensibly taught? And I think
Right.
many do. And I think they're getting
Yeah.
louder, thank God, to
Yeah.
see Christ in the faces of all humans, the enemy, the sick, the dying, the imprisoned, the foreigner, the homeless, the neighbor, especially the non-Christians.
I
Because
mean,
it's just so important that Jesus was to remember Jesus was Jewish. We're supposed to be free, have freedom of religion. But yeah,
Jesus was Jewish. He wasn't white. But if you look at all the paintings of him, he kind of looks like a hippie.
it's true.
He looks like a white hippie.
He does. And no kidding, he wasn't white, but this is the this is what we have learned and like we have been taught, and that's a fascinating thing too. Like honestly, that could be a whole episode. What we have been taught about. I mean, there's things going on globally that are dehumanizing, as we know, right?
Absolutely.
If you believe one thing or the other, like you're not seeing children as children, you're seeing them as Hamas, or you're seeing
Mm,
Jewish Americans as Zionists. Like it's dehumanizing. These are like
yeah.
a lot of people who agree on the same thing, and then they get dehumanized by these polarized views that feed the extremists that are keeping this stuff going. There is
Yep.
so much of this. It isn't just here. It's just here is what we're talking about right now, because
Well, because we're living it in a new way. I
yeah.
mean, the reality of it is, and I've seen this so many times recently, 10 years ago, nope, nope, have to be longer ago than that. 15 years ago, if everything that was happening here in the United States was on the news, happening in another country, we'd be aghast. I have pearls on. We'd be clutching our pearls. But now it's just like, huh, look at this.
No, we are frogs boiling in water.
Oh my God. Yeah, we
We
are.
are. Yeah, and then we were talking yesterday about how like what can we control, what can we not control?
Mm,
Um, do we, like there's so much of this we can't control, but I think the more conversations we have to remind ourselves, like to remind each
yeah.
other, to remind ourselves, and anyone listening who cares to do this with themselves is if you could see human first,
Mm,
could you go out of your comfort zone and your normal ways of learning and find out more? Like look for the humans in everything you think you believe. I really think it would be quite an education. I can't promise you there's fair fact checking available, but I think you could look for humanity in everything you believe, and you could enjoy being wrong.
hmm.
I enjoy being wrong. I'm never.
I mean, I do
I
too.
do. I love when I'm wrong about someone or something, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm not always
yeah,
great about it in the moment, but
right.
I do love to find out that we have more in common than we thought.
Well, that is a perfect transition to the song you picked today.
Mm. Only Human by Rag and Bone. So here's the words, and then you have a good one to share too. But I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put your blame on me. Don't put your blame on me. Oh, take a look in the mirror. What do you see? Do you see it clearer? Are you deceived in what you believe? Because I'm only human after all. You're only human after all. Don't put the blame on me. Don't put your blame on me.
And then the other one that we picked was John Mayer, and now I've forgotten the title of this song, so I only captured, oh, Waiting on the World to Change by John
Mm,
Mayer. And it's just sort of starts out, me and all my friends were all misunderstood. They say we stand for nothing, and there's no way we ever could. Now we see everything that's going wrong with the world and those who lead it. We just feel like we don't have the means to try to rise above and beat it. So we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. I don't
mm.
think we have that luxury. I think we
No.
need to step up and step out. And as you said, I mean, I think the easiest step, the tiny, uh, it's a small, maybe easy is the wrong word, because I think it is when you're so steeped, again, Democrats and non-Democrats alike, when you're so steeped in this, and we've been steeped in this since 2015 intensely and much longer, probably most of our Gen X lives
Mm-hmm.
subconsciously, right? It's easy to fall into demonization of other. Um, I think for me, one of the things I've been trying to do is not argue online because I realize, well, A, it makes no difference, but B, their beliefs are their beliefs. Their experience backs up their belief. And so it does me no good to argue online. But but instead, like you said, really looking at myself and 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 owning how I want to show up in the world, and knowing that everyone is human and has the rights to love, safety, and belonging. And when they're fearful that they were going to lose any of those things, fear leads us to do very unfortunate things.
Yeah, I have to say, not to go backwards because we are having a beautiful wrap up, but we laughed when he said they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. We thought there's no way people could believe that. And his vice presidential candidate admitted that it wasn't based in fact, that it was a good story. And so yet still that seeps in. So
Except
it's an
really,
amazing
they're
thing.
not eating the cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio anymore. That just
Uh,
magically went away.
yeah, there was no one arrested,
Nope.
no one claimed to have a pet eaten.
Nope.
Um, yeah. So dehumanization is everywhere. It's in rhetoric about immigrants. It's about LGBTQ people, urban neighborhoods. As a mom of a disabled young adult, it's everywhere. And
Yep.
it is the weapon of fear and division and power. And we do not have to choose to wield it ourselves. And
Mhm.
that is something that I like you deciding not to fight online. Good for you. It is also like before I assume
Mm.
anything about what someone believes or what this means about them, I'm wanting to get curious. That's my response to it. Find out more, see if you can have a conversation.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there really, with the exception of the 1%, there really isn't anybody currently in the United States that isn't struggling in some way, shape, or form. So people are feeling stress. They're feeling hunger to be seen and heard. And if we could let go of the label and see these people as capable, give them a chance, see beyond, again, these assumptions and labels, then we will realize that we all are just human and we could give each other just a modicum of dignity.
It's beautiful. It's a perfect place to end.
Hmm.
Let's rehumanize.
Woo! All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.
Bye.